This conference will now be recorded.
All right, anyone, any questions, guys, before I get started? Anyone, any questions? So yesterday we were more getting into things like how do you establish a service connection, and then we were doing a complete flow of a release pipeline. So here we have a repository, which is a .NET Core application, and we are working on the develop branch of this particular, let's say, repository out here. It's an ASP.NET 3.1 application out here that I have, and then I have a build pipeline, which is going ahead and, let's say, building my code and producing the artifact in the form of a .zip file. And after that, I have a release pipeline with one single stage inside it. So these are called single stage releases with one simple task called Azure App Service deployment. So all I'm doing is just going ahead, taking that particular code and deploying onto the app service that I have created manually on the portal out here as such. And in today's session, I want to go into a concept called infrastructure as a code, which means that firstly, can I write my infrastructure in the form of a JSON code? Like, for example, ARM templates. And can we deploy the ARM templates using Azure DevOps? So not only the code. Now today, if you look at this code, right, it tries to go ahead and, let's say, deploy on an app service called demo app service DevOps. And if I go into the app services, I don't have that particular app service. I just went and deleted all the app services that I do have. I just have one app service which is called some container app service or something like this. So I deleted those app services out here. I don't have the app service. And what I want to do is that I want to create the app service using the DevOps practice. This is what I want to do today. And I want to, let's say, try giving an end-to-end pipeline, which goes ahead not only deploys the code, but also goes ahead, creates the infrastructure before deploying the code. This will help you control what kind of an infrastructure you would need. And this will also help you control, meaning when you go and write an ARM template, I would like to now store the ARM template in the repository. I don't want to go ahead and, let's say, uh, I don't want to go ahead and, let's say, write the code, write the ARM templates in my local machine. I also want to write my code and store it. So write my ARM template and store it in the repository so that whenever a DevOps engineer goes ahead and tries to make a change, even he needs an approval, he needs the right process and so on and so forth. So this is the concept that I'll be going into today. But before that, any questions that I can take regarding the topics that we're discussing? Anyone, any questions that I can take before we move forward? Anyone, anything?
So about the agent tool,
Hmm.
once the agent is offline, can we bring it to online, sir?
Yes, you can bring it online also. You have to go inside your agent, start your virtual machine normally. Once you start your virtual machine, and if you have configured the agent as a service, once your virtual machine starts, in a matter of, let's say, about 5 to 6 minutes after it starts, the agent should come back online. Yes, any more questions, guys? Okay, so let's do one thing. Let's start writing our ARM template for a simple app service. So I just want to create an app service and an app service plan. This is what I want to do. So I'll just go to my VS Code, and I'll just open up a new folder. Let's open up a new folder out here. Let's say infrastructure as a code, DevOps, something like this. And once inside, just go ahead, say select language, say Azure Resource Manager template, and allow my template to load. And now it's, let's say, loading the template. And once that's done, I'll go ahead and say ARM exclamation. This is the first thing that I do. And in order to write in order to, let's say, go ahead and, let's say, I want to create two different resources. One being the app service plan, and the other being a simple app service under it. These are the two things that I want to go ahead and let's say create this out. And I want to parameterize everything. I want to establish parameterization, and I would like to declare the parameters using Azure DevOps. Let's see what are the advantages that we have while doing this. And then of course I would go ahead and introduce something called Azure DevOps variables and so on and so forth out here as such. So let's give it a second. Firstly, let me go inside the resources, and let's wait for a minute. It is, let's say, loading all the templates out here. So once it loads, I'll go ahead and create my plan. I'll create the plan, which is a Windows plan out here, and also I'll create the app service under it. So these are the two things that I'll go ahead and create, and I would like to deploy these two things using Azure DevOps. I'm not deploying it using my local machine at all. So I'll say ARM hyphen, and I'll see, let's say plan. So if I click on plan, I have a resource block that gets created for an app service plan. So it says, okay, fine, this is the name of the app service plan called app service plan name one. The type is Microsoft.web/server farms. It's telling location wherever you create the resource group. I'll take that location out here. So probably I'll create my resource group in a region called East US2. Then it's telling, okay, fine, what is the name of the plan? I'll say F1 with a capacity of 1. I don't need the tags. I can remove this out. And in place of these two properties, first thing it's telling name app service plan 1, and here it is app service plan 1. I want to replace it with a parameter. So very firstly what I'll do is I'll come here into my parameters, and I'll declare a new parameter called app service plan name. So I'm declaring a parameter. I'll say the type of this particular parameter is a string. I can put a description telling that the name of the app service plan. Just scroll down, and going at this particular line, I'll just change this app service plan. I'll delete this out, and I'll call the parameter. And how do I call the parameter? Is just by putting a square bracket here, and I'll say parameters. Yes, square brackets, parameters, and then I'll say app service plan name. And the same applies to line number 25 as well. Where I'll say it is parameters, and I'll say it is app service plan name out here as such. So I'm replacing wherever I hard coded all the values, I'm replacing it with the parameters. The reason I'm replacing it with parameters is for reusability, meaning I want one single template to create a plan called probably dev plan for development team. I want the same template to create a plan name called QA plan for the QA team. Same thing, I want to create something called stage plan for the operations team. I want to create production plan. So I want to create multiple plans by using one simple template. I don't want to, let's say, go ahead and do so many templates out here as such. So I'll say, okay, fine, clear this out. And I'll just scroll down. I'll say, okay, fine, this is all good. Now I'll put one more comma here. I'll say ARM hyphen web hyphen app. Very first thing. It's an Azure web app that I'm trying to create. So what I'll be doing again is I'll just come here. I'll say new parameter web app name. I'll give a parameter called web app name. I'll do the same thing. In place of the name, I'll remove. I'll say parameters. Sorry. I'll say parameters web app name. Here the type here is Microsoft.web/sites. This is good enough. API version I'm not changing. Location, I'll say it is resource group.location. I will not give any tags here. I'll remove the tags here. And it's telling depends upon, and it's asking for the resource ID of the app service plan, whose name now is not app service plan name 1. but it is parameters app service. This is what I'm replacing. I just scroll down, and in the properties, it's asking me for the name of the web app. So I'll say parameters web app name and just scroll down. I'll remove this out and say this is parameters app service plan name. So I'm giving all the necessary IDs, and I created these two resources, which is nothing but an app service plan and an app service that is running inside the app service plan out here. I'll just save my template. I'll say web app.json, save it in a .json format. So I have my template right now, and what I'll be doing right now is that I'll be storing my template inside my repository. So this is the repository. I'll create one more probably folder inside this repository called infrastructure. So what I'll do is I'll first clone this particular branch. So I'll clone this in VS Code. I'll say open. I'll say just go down and go into the junk folder, and I will just say select the repository location. I'll let's clone this out here. I'll say open a new window. So I have this particular iOS application, and I have the main branch. So I'll firstly switch this out to my develop branch. And since this is since the develop branch is actually protected, I'll create a feature branch out of it. I'll say create a new branch. I'll say a feature. I'll say here in IAC test, something like this, out of the develop branch. And in here, I'll create a new folder called infrastructure. And in the infrastructure folder, let me go back, and I'll just copy my template from the main folder into the infrastructure folder. And once copied, it should identify there is one change. I'll just stage all these changes. I'll say added ARM template, and I'll say commit. Once committed, I'll publish my branch. And once the branch is published, I'll just go ahead and go to branches. I'll create a pull request from my feature branch into the develop branch, which is going to add one file called infrastructure. I'm storing this file inside, let's say, my uh, Azure repository, which is just going ahead and creating one simple app service and the other app service plan. That's it. And I'll just scroll down. I'll say added an ARM template. This is good. I'll say create. So work item has to be linked. So this is something that I forgot to do. I'll say add work item. I'll add some work item out here, and all the required checks are completed, and that particular person called a contributor has to approve this out. So automatically, as in when you create a pull request, this particular person who's your lead will get an email. So I'll just log into that particular Azure DevOps using that particular contributor account. So I'm logging into Azure DevOps. I'll say R by contributor email.com, and let me go ahead and sign into this particular account. So this is me signing with a different account, and once I sign in, I can go ahead either I'll have a link provided to me over an email, or I can directly go to the pull requests. I can come into the pull request. I'll say approve this out, and once approved, even this particular person, which is class Azure DevOps, this particular account will also see that the approval has been received, and I'll say complete, and I'll say delete the feature or delete this particular branch after it's merged. Let's do that. Let's say complete merge, and it's merging the pull request out here right now. Now, as and when it merges the pull request, right, it'll go ahead and also give you a build pipeline, because now you are doing a continuous integration. Let me cancel this out for now. So I'm going ahead and canceling this particular build pipeline. The reason that I'm canceling is that now in my build pipeline, let's say edit pipeline, all I'm doing is that I'm doing a code build. I am doing a code build out here. My entire code is getting built using this particular build pipeline. Now, what I want to do is that along with the code build, I also want to copy. No, I'm not telling building my ARM templates because ARM templates are already in a serialization format. The server can directly understand the format of JSON, so I don't have to build it. I just have to copy it. I have to copy it from my repository to my artifacts. So from repo to the artifacts out here. So source would be the repository, destination would be the artifacts, and my artifact section is also called as build.artifact staging directory. This is where I want to copy it out. This is the location where I want to copy it. So what I'll do is I'll just add a task called copy. So I'll say add, I will say copy. I'll just scroll down, I'll say add files. And this file should be one step above the build artifacts, the publish artifacts. So I'll say copy. Here it's telling me, okay, fine, copy files to where? Firstly, it's asking me what is the source folder. I'll click here. I'll say this is my source folder, which is called infrastructure. Inside that, please copy a file called webapp.json. That's the name of the file that we have given, right? So it is webapp.json into the target folder. It's telling where should I copy it out. So if I click on this one, it's telling example $build.artifact staging directory. Just copy this variable, paste it here. That's it. So all I'm doing is that I'm taking a source called infrastructure folder. Then I'm copying into a target called artifact staging directory. And finally, I am publishing all the artifacts. So I'm going into the artifact staging directory. I'm publishing all the artifacts with an artifact name called drop. So I'm creating the artifact with the name called drop out here. And I'll say save this out. I'll say added a copy task. I'll say save. And I don't need this task right now because I'm using a Microsoft hosted agent. So I'll remove this task so that I can cut down the time for which my build pipeline really runs. Let's just save and queue. Let's just save and run. So what I'm doing right now is that I had all the earlier tasks like restore, build, and publish, but I have added one more task out here called copy files, which is just going to do one simple thing. It's just going to copy your files from a source to a destination. That's it. And the source here is my infrastructure folder that is there in the repository. The destination here would be the build.artifact staging directory, which is nothing but the drop location where your artifacts are produced. So this is what I'm doing. So let me wait for a minute. And if you see this, it has started the job. So it's saying checkout, it's doing a restore, then it's doing a build, then the publish, and then the copy files out here. So it's just going ahead into your source repository, getting the file, copying it out, and now it is expected that, or it is expected that this particular build pipeline produces this particular artifact. So if I come here earlier, right, if I just say updated the code, and if you look at the earlier build pipeline, you have a drop folder inside which you have one simple, let's say, file called iOS application.zip. This is your artifact. Now, if I come down here, and if you see the latest one right now, this will have two files. One is called iOS application.zip. The other one is called webapp.json. This is because we now have a new task called copy files out here as such. So it's saying, okay, fine, I'm copying the files and so on and so forth. Now, as and when the continuous deployment is done, you should have a continuous, continuous integration is done. You should have a continuous deployment that got triggered. which will fail. And the reason this is failing, and yes, I have given a self-hosted pool, so I'll just cancel this out. So this particular deployment will fail. The reason, it's trying to do an app service deployment on an Azure app service that doesn't exist on the portal. So there is no Azure app service that exists on the portal. So it will simply say that, okay, fine, you know what, I'm trying to deploy into an app service that's not there. So it will fail. I'll fail. So what I'll do, I'll edit this out. I'll say edit pipeline. And in here, I'll just go into the job and tasks. I'll add one more task. I'll say add, and I'll talk about ARM template deployment, called ARM template deployment, which will take an ARM template that is there in the artifact section and deploy it out. This is what it does. So instead of doing it on my local machine, I'll just say add. I'll get it to the top. This is the first task, and I'll just rename this as create infrastructure. Also, I'll change my pool. Sorry, I'll change my pool from a self-hosted pool to a hosted pool. To Azure pipelines, I'll say this is Windows latest. I'll just scroll down. It's asking, okay, fine, where do you want to deploy? I'll say it is a resource group. It's asking what is my Azure Service Manager connection. It's just asking what is the service connection. I'll say this is a sample connection. This is what I created. It's asking what is a subscription. I'll just click on this one and I see the subscription called Visual Studio Enterprise subscription. It's now telling what is a resource group. Now I want to create a resource group called devrg. Right now I don't have a resource group with the name called devrg. So I'll say it's dev-rg. I'm just giving a simple resource group name out here called devrg. It is not there. This task will create the resource group out here if it's not there out here as such. So you don't even have to create a resource group. This task will take care of it. This task is going to go ahead and take care of creation of the resource group out here. So I'll say it is just the name called devrg. I'll say location. Just click on this. I'll select a location called East US2. You can go for a location like North Central US or West US3 or something like that, so that the deployment happens through. I'll just scroll down. It's asking your template. It's telling me where is your template. Can you give me a template? I'll click on the three dots. I'll say drop location. Inside the drop location, I'll say that there's a template called webapp.json. I'll say OK. And here I have something called override template parameters, meaning it's telling, okay, fine, you might have declared some parameters in your template. I said, yes, I declared some parameters in my template. Now it's telling, you know what, using this section called override template parameters, you can give, sorry, you can give the values to those particular parameters. I click on these three dots. Now it's asking app service plan name, web app name. These are the two things that we actually declared. So it's telling, okay, fine, you know what, these are empty parameters right now. Can you give me something? In quotes, I'll say this is dev plan 01. In quotes, this is dev app service 000 USCs 2 or 000 XYZ, something like this. This is what I'll say. I'm saying, okay, fine, this is dev app service. This is what I want you to create. I'll copy the name of the app service. I'll say, okay. Just scroll down. The rest of all is good. So I'm creating the infrastructure, which is creating a resource group and creating an app service plan with the name called devplan01, an app service with the name called dev app service 000 XYZ. Now the next step, which is called app service deployment. This is now trying to deploy a zip file onto an app service with this particular name. I'll change this out. Whatever name that I have given in the earlier step, I'll paste it out here. So whatever name that I've copied or whatever name that I've copied from my earlier step, which is create infrastructure, I'll copy this out and I'll say save. I'll say added ARM template deployment task. I'll say okay. I'll say create a release. Into the development, I'll say create. So now I've created release for running on a self-hosted agent, sorry, running on a hosted agent of Azure, this is now going to do two things. First, it's going to go ahead and check whether your infrastructure exists or not. If it exists, it won't do anything because ARM templates work on an incremental mode. If it doesn't, it'll end up creating your infrastructure. And once it creates the infrastructure, the next task will come into picture, which is app service deployment. So on top of the created infrastructure, you'll now release the code out here as such. This is what we are doing from step 1 to step 2 out here as such. So let's wait for this particular initialize job to happen. Then you have download artifacts. Then you have the create infrastructure task here. So if you see the create infrastructure task here, still checking if the resource group exists dev.rg, it's telling okay fine, resource group does not exist on the portal. It say okay fine, I'll try to create this particular resource group, and it created the resource group successfully. So if you go back into your Azure portal and just refresh this Azure portal out here, I'm able to see something called dev.rg. If I click on dev.rg and if I click on the deployments here, it's gonna now tell me that okay fine, there is a deployment that is coming through. This is the same deployment that's happening right now with this particular name called something with 7FFD. Same thing. And if you click on this particular deployment, this will tell you what is being deployed. So it says okay fine, there's a dev plan, there is this particular dev app service that got deployed, and even here it's telling the same. Okay fine, the deployment is started successfully, and now it's telling okay fine, you know what, that template got deployed successfully out here. And the second step follows, which is nothing but nothing but pushing the code from your build pipeline into the created infrastructure out here. So this is called end to end. This is called infrastructure as a code out here. So if you look at what I have done, I have firstly made sure that I update my repository with a folder called infrastructure, inside which I have a template called webapp.json. After that, I changed my or I updated my build pipeline by adding a task called copy, which is just going into that particular folder, copying all my template, producing it inside a folder called build.artifact staging directory. Then I came with a release pipeline, and in the release, I just said edit, added a task called infrastructure creation, and I overrode all my variables. So if I just scroll down, it's telling okay fine, what is the service connection, what is the name of the resource group, the location, the template that I choose, which is already there in my artifacts folder. And after that, I have overridden all the values, all the parameter values in this particular template, and I'm deploying the code on top of it. So if you now see the releases, release 4 is done, which not only created the infrastructure but also pushed the code. So if I come back, go into this particular resource group. So now I have the app service run, the app service. I did not create anything manually today. And if I now say browse, this is gonna tell me that I have some code or I have some kind of a deployment out here as such. So once I do this, still okay fine, Azure DevOps demo. This is CI/CD demo using Azure DevOps out here as such. This is how I have pushed the code. But before I push the code, I created the required infrastructure before doing that in order to make sure that we create this end to end and deploy things out here as such. Is any questions still here, guys? Anyone, any questions that I can take till you? Anyone, any questions, guys? Is everyone following till what we said?
Yes, sir. Sir, yesterday already you have released deployment, no, sir?
Hmm.
So today also can we release ARM templates? Means any number of times can we release?
Yes. So any number of times you can do that. So if I just come here back again, and for example, let's say I make a change in my repository. So in the iOS application, let me do that. Let's say I see test or something like this. I'll create a work item and I'll just go here into the pages, index.html. I'll say edit. I'll say version 1. I'm just adding one more thing called version 1 out here, just to make sure that there's a change. I'll create a pull request into the develop branch. I'll say create a PR. Contributor must approve this out. So I'll just come here as a contributor. I'll go into the pull request, approve my pull request out here, and this is done. I'll complete, delete the branch after the merge is done. So once the branch is deleted, this will automatically trigger a continuous integration pipeline again. So it automatically did trigger a continuous integration pipeline, which is again going to do the same thing. It's going to take your last commit. So the last commit was updated something. So this is the updated index.cshtml file. It's taking the last commit, doing a build. So it's saying restore, build, publish, and all these things out. Same thing again. And once that's done, a release will automatically be created. It'll go ahead create an automatic release, which is called release 5. And in the release 5, same steps are again going to happen, which is create the infrastructure. But this time around, your ARM template deployment will see or understand that the infrastructure is already there. So it'll say, okay, fine, the infrastructure is already there. So I won't do any changes there. I'll just check whether everything is there in place or not. And then it'll move to the code. It'll see which portion of the code has been updated. It'll update that particular code, and you can just go ahead and refresh this particular screen. Your version 1 after the deployment is done. So yes, any number of times you can. This is reusable. Any number of times, sorry, any number of times you can go ahead and let's say trigger of this particular pipeline. Until unless you're not really making any drastic change in your release pipeline. Like for example, you cannot take the same release pipeline and let's say change the location to West US, because that will try to create a new app service and all these things. So if you see, it created a release 5, and in the release 5, it's just checking if the infrastructure is there or not. Now in here, I cannot just come here and change the location to West US or something. If I do that, right, if I don't change all these values, it will fail. So that's when failures will come. But if you don't change anything, if you are okay with the same infrastructure, it's going to go ahead and let's say tell that okay fine, it's creating the infrastructure, and then it'll push the code out here as such. So again, when it says creating the infrastructure, all it's doing is that if you go back into your restart script, is that it's checking whether the existing infrastructure is there or not. It's like, okay fine, you know what, I'm checking whether all the app service settings are there in place. If it's there, I'll just say okay. It'll also check the same thing for your web app, and it didn't do anything. It went ahead, said status is okay, I'm good with that. After that, it will say okay fine, this is done, and it will move forward to the next step, and it will deploy your code inside your app service out here. So this is what it's doing end to end out here as such. Yes, anyone, any more questions here?
Good morning.
Go ahead, please.
Is there any flow like we see any flow from top to bottom, like
So
first
is
creating the
hmm,
first in pipeline, yeah,
hmm.
series I mean, so like after which step we have to follow.
To answer
I know
that,
you are
let's
saying
see.
perfectly, but like I'm getting a little bit
Hmm,
confusion over here. Yeah, after which agent I should create, where we should deploy.
that's fine, but I'll ask you the same question. So let's say you have three different things out here. One being the repository, the other being the build, the third being the release pipelines, right? So
Hmm.
build and release
This is
pipelines
clear
out here,
true. This is clear true.
right? So when you say the flow, let's see this. Would you be able to start directly from the release pipeline?
No, first repository.
First repository, because you need a code, right? You need a code
Yes.
base. And
Hmm.
okay, fine. After the repository, can you just start directly with the release?
No, first I need after repository build pipeline.
Now build pipeline, right? So you have a flow telling that there is a repo, then there
Mm-hmm.
is a build, and then there is a release. And even in the build,
Mm-hmm.
you have to follow a flow telling
Yeah,
that
and
firstly.
request if you can.
Mhm.
Sorry to interrupt. I request you if you can show us that flow once. Uh,
Which
which
flow
one
you're
we are
talking
doing
about? Can you
under
come again,
build
please?
build pipeline. Build the pipeline.
Under the build
Like you have,
pipeline. So on.
yes, yes. You have shown, you have drawn
Mm-hmm.
something and then you have shown, like repository. Then we are
Mm-hmm.
going to the build pipeline, then release pipeline. In the same way, if you
Okay.
can draw and write and show, that would be great helpful.
See, this one I cannot draw because it's already there in a diagrammatic way in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
This is the exact flow that I'm following. Again, I didn't do anything. I'm just going ahead, saying new pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
I say use classic editor, and when I'm saying use classic editor out here, I'll just say continue, and I'm just telling what is the template that I want. I'm saying it is ASP.NET Core, and this is itself giving me a flow. That's it. I'm just making use of the same flow out here. I'm not doing anything different out here as such. Now, if you look at my pipelines, I'm not doing anything different. I'm just taking the
No,
same flow out here.
here I understand. After that, we are creating something, then we are merging it, then we are. One thing, one small doubt I have, like push and
Hmm.
pull request.
Hmm.
Push is something like, if I'm a developer, I'm developing some codes, I have to push it to
Okay.
you as you are a DevOps engineer, right? Then you
No,
will
you're
take
not
it from
pushing
there.
it to me. No, no, you're not pushing it
Not
to me.
here.
I'm,
Not here.
no,
Starting
that's
everything.
what I'm telling you. That's what I'm telling
Please,
you.
please.
When you say pushing it to a DevOps engineer, what do you mean by that?
I
When you
was in
say,
an, I
Mhm.
was thinking like push is something like I'm a developer, I developed a code, then I'm
Okay.
sending to the DevOps engineer to test it, and that is called the push one.
No, why
Then
will I test it?
take the code.
The point is, why will I, as a DevOps engineer, really test it out? So you, as a developer, already have a repository. All you do is push
Hmm.
your code into the repository. That's it. Once you push your code and
So
once you merge your pull request, the flow will
exactly what
automatically
we are
start.
going there. Exactly what we are doing there. Pushing the code in the sense, why can't we develop directly the code into the repository itself?
How would you develop the code in the repository?
There,
Do you
this is
have?
why I have a little bit of confusion here itself, and due to
Yes, sir.
which
But
I
the
watched the
the
videos three
point
to
is,
four, but not getting it.
yeah. But the point here is that why would you develop the code in the repository? Why would you or why are we even doing a build pipeline here? When you say why can't I develop the code in the repository? My question is that how would you develop the code in the repository?
Like in
See, either
repository,
you
we are
have to do a
creating a
build.
report. In repository, we are
Mhm.
creating one report, then we are creating a file, right? In file, already we have a main file,
When you say
right?
main
Main
file,
branch,
what do you mean by
main
branch?
branch.
Okay. Okay. Hmm.
Please
Okay,
correct
we
me if
have a
I'm
main
wrong.
branch.
So
Yes.
after going
Yes,
to
yes, we do
file,
have a main. Mhm.
main branch, and main
Okay.
branch is only like we are keeping it safe so that nobody can,
Okay.
like change any codes or anything. So
Yes.
as a developer, I'm just going and creating one branch for me, so that if there is
No,
any changes needs to be done,
that's a feature branch. Now, as for a developer, I, as a
Mhm.
DevOps engineer, I am creating a develop branch. You, as a developer,
Mhm.
you are creating your feature branches. There is a difference between those two things out here as such.
So here you can see that after main branch, we have create one develop branch as well.
Yes, who has created the develop branch? Is it the developer or is it the DevOps engineer?
DevOps engineer.
Yes. So you, as a developer, you are creating what? Your feature branches.
Feature,
So you are using my develop branch that I created as the source, and you are making sure that you clone that branch, you make changes to that branch, and update that
Abhishek,
branch via a
sorry.
pull request.
Abhishek, can I
Hmm?
get you 1 hour of time when you are free to clarify
Not
all this
really, my
doubt?
friend. Not in this week. 1 hour is like too difficult for me to, kind of give you. Please go through the branching and merging strategy. Very importantly, please go through that branching and merging strategy once, then continue with the flow. Now, very importantly, I want you to go through that, try
Sure,
this out.
I'll do it again today.
Mhm. Try this out, and probably this weekend or something, I can give you some time.
Please.
On a
And one
weekday,
more
it'll
thing.
become a little difficult. So go ahead, please.
No, weekend is okay for me.
Hmm. Go ahead, please.
And one more thing, like I visited institute, I think on Saturday,
Okay.
and my resume is got updated. And tomorrow, I think I have two interviews scheduled. Today one.
Hmm.
And I was in the impression that once we update the resume, I'll be coming to know that how to, attend the interviews. what kind of
Okay.
questions he'll be asking. So
Okay.
I'm worried that today I have I got it from this one Mindtree 12 to
Okay.
12:30 p.m.
Okay.
So shall I attend the interview and see how does it how it's going to
Yes.
change?
Go ahead, please. I mean, you have the questions also that I have given. I would say please go ahead, attend the interview, and you will know once you sit in the interview what are the kind of questions that they kind of do ask out here as such.
And suppose tomorrow also I have to, if I'm not able to clear it, but still we have not completed the terraforms and all these things,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So can I do something so that I will not receive the calls till the times I complete this terraforms or Naukri or somewhere?
That's fine. Don't update your resume on a daily basis. You can, I mean, you can still receive your calls, but you can say that you're busy a little bit this week. You can postpone all your interview schedules to the next week out here.
Yeah, because Suresh shared me one thing if I'll continue once I update the resume and we start receiving the calls back to back,
Mhm.
and most probably sometimes we may stop getting calls. So little bit worried
Mm,
about that.
you
Is it
can schedule it to the next week. So whatever calls that you're getting, you can schedule it to the next week out here as such.
okay? Thank you so much.
That shouldn't be a
And I'll go through the merging and branches again and again.
Mhm. Sure.
Thank you.
Yes. Any more questions, guys? Any more questions with this process flow? All right. So let me do one thing. Let me go to my release pipeline, and here I'll just say edit. And I just have one particular stage called development, inside which I have two different tasks called create infrastructure and app service deployment. This is for a team called development team. What I'll do right now is I'll just do a clone. So I'll hit the clone button here. What this is going to do is that this is now going to go ahead and create a same stage out here. So it's just going to take a copy of the stage and create another stage with the name called copy of development. So what I'll do, I'll rename this as QA for my testers. I'll just go inside this. Name is okay. Even the agent is okay. In the create infrastructure, I'll just scroll down. Instead of saying it as dev rg, I'll say it is QA-rg for QA team. I'll just scroll down right now. Instead of telling it as QA plan, sorry, instead of telling it as dev plan, I'll say it as QA plan. And instead of telling it as dev web app, something like this, I'll say it as QA web app. Then go to the next task, and I'll say this is QA app service. And I can go ahead, create another stage called staging and then production. These pipelines are called multi-stage release pipelines. These are called multi-stage, which are having multiple stages in the same pipeline out here. And now this pipeline, if I trigger this off, I can save this out and I can trigger and I can create a release out here. Once I create a release, this release will automatically go ahead, get get deployed into, let's say, the environment called development. After development, it will also move forward into something called QA. So in development, I have all the, let's say, services already. I have created, I've also deployed the code, but still to continue the flow, I'm just going at the development out here. And if you see this right, I'll just refresh the screen. You should have something like version 1 out here as such. So it says version 1 because I have already deployed it earlier. And now it'll just go ahead do the same thing. It'll just see what are the infrastructure changes. If nothing, it'll just validate everything and move forward. And code deployment also will happen the same way. And then it's going to move into QA. And for QA, it'll again check whether that particular research group called QA-RG exists or not. It says no, it'll create one and then go ahead, deploy a plan and an app service for QA, and then go ahead and push the code into the QA environment. Same thing what happened for the development. So what I'm doing is that firstly I'm creating one stage and I'm just replicating the same stages across. So I'm saying, okay, fine, one stage is created. I'll move to another stage called QA. After QA, I'll move to another stage called, let's say, staging. After that, I'll go to another stage called production, which is my end-to-end release pipeline. Which means my code is going from development, then it's moving into QA, then it's moving into, let's say, staging, then it's moving into production, and later we'll also introduce automatic testing, like what in development how the testing is being done, in QA how the testing is being done, in staging how the testing is being done, and so on and so forth. So now if you see, development is done, and after development is done, it's moving to the next stage called QA. So all the code and all the infrastructure, the same thing what I did in development is now moving to QA, and I'm replicating the same thing out here as such. Once I'm replicating this out, it's now telling, okay, fine, the initialize job is done. After which it's trying to create the infrastructure. After that, it'll go ahead and, let's say, push the code onto the created infrastructure out here. So the same thing, but now it'll happen for an environment called QA. It'll happen now for an environment called QA out here. This is the automation for me, meaning this is now automation for me, which means that as and when a developer goes ahead, commits a code, meaning as I'm a developer, I'll go ahead, let's say, change something in my repository, change the code. Once that's done, automatically my build pipeline is getting triggered, automatically my release pipeline is getting triggered, and all the code and all the, let's say, changes are being pushed into the respective environments. And I as a developer, or I as a QA, I as a developer can come here into this particular link and test it out. I as a QA will have a different link called QA app service, something like that. I can go ahead and test it out there and see how my code is really working out here as such. So all I do in a DevOps practice is that I just go ahead, I as a developer or a QA, just go ahead, commit my changes onto the repository. That's it. I then start testing all my environment, or I'll then start testing all my web applications once the code deployment is done. So this is what we'll be doing. And in the coming classes, right, we'll be further automating our pipelines. So in the next class, we'll be further automating the same pipeline using something called variables. And here we'll introduce multiple things like what are pipeline variables, what are variable groups, and so on and so forth out here as such. And it's going to be a very important class tomorrow on variables and variable groups, guys, because 50% of the Azure DevOps is going to rely upon your understanding of what is variables and variable groups out here. So please make sure that you practice today's session and come to tomorrow's session out here, because only if you understand today's session and how it is going, you'll be able to follow how we are going in the tomorrow session out here as such. Is any questions out here that I can take? Anyone, any questions I can take?
Deployment or QA, will they'll be giving us a date to release
I'm sorry, can you come again, please?
for the deployment or QA?
Hmm.
So will they giving us a date, sir, to release, or
Yes.
directly we can?
No, we will have a date, meaning our date of deployment into the development environment or the QA environment depends upon the date of delivery that you have with the client. Let's say by this end of the week, I want to give the code to the client. From the start of the week, I'll first start to deploy into development. Take one day, test it out, then go ahead with QA. If something goes wrong, then I'll have to repeat the entire procedure out here as such. So the delivery date for, or the deployment date into the or development environment or your QA environment depends completely upon when you want to take the code into production. Yes, any more questions, guys? Any more questions here? All right, so that's it from me, guys. Thank you and have a good day ahead.